Hello and welcome to Wicklow County Library Service's Halloween story time from Bay Bookstore today. We're going to read you some stories. Well, I am. My name is Vita. I'm going to read you some stories from Why the Moon Travels by Oein DeBhairduin and illustrated by Leanne McDonagh. This is a really beautiful and important book. It is the first collection of Mincare stories, that's stories from the travelling community, told by, collected and illustrated by people from that community. But beyond that, it's just a fantastic book. It's published by Skein Press. Thank you to them for permission to share these stories with you today. So I'm going to read two stories. The first story is spooky and the second story is frightening. So that is just a warning for anybody who gets easily spooked. Well, not easily spooked, very frightening. So definitely older kids for the second one. You ready? Here we go. Light a storytelling candle for extra spookiness. Okay. So the first story is called The Women Who Gather. Once, there were old women who would travel the land carrying tightly woven willow baskets to gather the fallen bark of crabapple trees, wilting St. John's wort plants, and any fresh beetroots they could find. They plucked the flax that grew brazenly along the roadsides and the wool snared in the thorns of brambles, hawthorns, trees, and firs. They dressed mostly in black, but the edges of their garments were lined in red, white, and yellow. Some of the women had additional stripes on their dresses for different colours, one for each of their children, living or departed. Their long hair was plaited in firm braids, and about their hips small beady pockets embellished with medals, tokens, and buttons were tied. Every evening they would boil and dye the wool red in a big cast iron pot that rested on the campfire in the heart of the molly in which they lived. The molly is a word for the camp. During the night, they would continue to spin and weave the cords and render them red for young children. They would sing songs of hope and melodies of joy in a chorus of sweet voices with minds of clear intent, stirring and carding the wool, weaving thoughts and prayers into the cords for the young. At dusk they would gather, and at night they would labour, and as dawn came, they would rest peacefully in their beds. This is how it was for a long time. However, as the years wore on, more and more children were born and welcomed into the world, and the old women who gathered began to struggle to keep the pace of their labour. They worked and worked and worked to make the cords of red the colour of blood, the tones of deep fire and iron rust. Despite the struggle, they decided that they would keep weaving cords and would one day weave a cord long enough to encircle the entire world so that no child would be without the care of a loving blessing. Dawn and dusk, night and day blended into one as the work continued, and the old women who gathered forgot to stop, to eat, and rest. Over time, their fingers, once kissed a soft pink with dye, became darker and darker, some brown from the dust of ashes, others black with the coal of the well-stocked fire that kept the dyeing pots boiling. Still, the old women who gathered worked on. The molly, once filled with songs and dances of joy, became silent as they focused more and more on their task. The sweat from their brows began to wash away the red from the cords, and the silk became silken grey gossamer. In time, the cords became thinner and as delicate as filigree, but at their core, they held their strength. Still, the old women who gathered worked on. They grew thin and bony as they neither slumbered nor feasted, and they began to shrink. Some of the old women who gathered worked one or two of their fingers away, while others kept their gathering baskets tightly strapped to their backs, not bothering to take them off between gathering, dyeing and weaving the cords. Their hearts remained warm, and their task remained their focus. In time, the old women grew smaller and smaller, less of this world and more of another, until one day they looked like little more than a bundling of fingers, spinning and weaving with gathering baskets on their backs, adorned with the stripes and shadings that once belonged to their dresses and beady pockets. They had become the first spiders. Even now they continue their work, spinning onwards and onwards across the world. A sense of protection can be found in many sources. In modern times, many of the Minkeri still wear and tie the cords. They mark the red and white cords of Philomena for protection, and to avoid being overlooked, the light blue of St. Joseph for healing, and the white silken cords of Mary, the untier of knots.